Вітаю всіх ще раз. Я гадаю, що ми можемо розпочинати.
Good morning, everybody. Once again, perhaps we will start. Thank you for accepting the invitation and for attending this presentation. Once again, I would like to emphasize that those who do not speak Ukrainian, you can take your headphones for translation, simultaneous translation at the end of this room, at the back of the room. And today, it is possible to join us online and choose the channel for translation and to listen in English if you want. This is English channel. I'm happy to introduce our guests and speakers. We have Denis Sultangaliyev, senior researcher from Volodymyr Ryzhko from Truth Hounds also, then Alina, and I'm Roman Koval, also from Truth Hounds, and then we'll have our special guests who will be connected online, and I'm happy to welcome Mr. Shotagayan from Project Expedite Justice, a partner organization which very closely cooperates with us. Ashot, we are very happy to have you here. Good morning, dear colleagues. Can you hear me properly? Yes, we can hear you. On behalf of the organization Project Expedite Justice, I'm happy to welcome all the participants of this event, both online in Kiev and those who joined online. I would like to welcome Truth Hounds with preparation, with finalization of this research, which is of huge importance, because yesterday's news about disconnection of ZNPP from the main lines again shows how important it is to emphasize the Russian Federation behavior is a grave breach of the IHL and all the norms. I would like to remind you that both Truth Hounds and Project Expedite Justice cooperate closely. We are a non-for-profit organization which was founded in 2016 in the USA by international lawyer, Ms. Cynthia Lai, who by that moment had gained huge experience in the international humanitarian law. Our objective is to bring in all available legal tools to defend the victims of grave breaches of IHL. We work both in Europe, in Africa, and help to the victims of crimes, international crimes, and bring in all the international humanitarian laws allowing people to seek for justice. Also, we provide assistance to the national judiciary assistance in implementation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law. We have very close cooperation with Truth Hounds, and we today are representing the kickoff two-year project on the international justice. During the future year, we will represent 4 more reports in various areas where the Russian Federation breached international humanitarian law as to Ukrainian citizens. That's why I would encourage you to follow our publications to be able to join the presentations of those reports. It's a big honor for us to be a peer reviewer of this report, which was prepared by the Truth Hounds Here I would like to use this opportunity and share my major opinion on it. I have all the grounds to believe that this very report, which we have been representing today, will become a valuable contribution to this area for the last 2 years. And because it profoundly covers major violations of IHL by the Russian Federation, and it clearly shows the link of Rosatom's deeds with the grave breaches of ILH, like torture and violation of nuclear safety. And in my colleagues from Truth Hounds will provide evidence and legal proof that the leaders of Rosatom should be brought to responsibility, both individually and Rosatom collectively as a corporation. More important is that the report could be used practically because it provides the victims and the beneficiaries with an opportunity and clear indication how to use the evidence for bringing the criminals to responsibility. I would like once again thank you to our colleagues from Truth Hounds for a huge work that was carried out, and I would like to thank you for attention to this report, and I wish you fruitful work today. Thank you, Ashot, for this introduction. Dear friends, I would add a couple of words that simultaneously with today's presentation here in Kiev, another my colleagues are presenting it in Vienna today to the EAEA headquarters, and actually we're doing this representation simultaneously. Moreover, the report itself is published on our website, and here you have a QR code which you can scan. You can look at the report. You can look individually at different parts of it in which you are mostly interested specifically. I hope that you managed to look at it. The idea of this survey started 2 years ago when we started to collect the first evidence from the witnesses, and the first review of the survey results were published more than a year ago. But since the ZNPP remains under occupation, and our access to the witnesses still remained limited during that 2 years, it took another additional time, another 2 years, to look more closely at some evidence to assess the nuclear safety and the situation with the nuclear security at the plant, and a new testimonies from the witnesses to evaluate the situation more carefully. When we look at the IHL situation, when we look at the challenges with the nuclear safety, we come to conclusion that Rosatom was very closely involved, and that the role of Rosatom in torture, in breaches of the nuclear safety, it remained high. On this slide, you can see what was our major goal and objectives when carrying out the survey. First of all, we would like our objective was to analyze the occupation itself, because occupation actually meant the new daily routine. These were new procedures which were imposed simultaneously with the new practices of intimidation and suppression of human activities, and we wanted to show the Rosatom's role in imposing this new occupational routine. Moreover, we relied on the witnesses' testimonies who clearly described the involvement of Rosatom to tortures. We disclosed the pattern of IHL breaches with our colleagues from Greenpeace. We jointly assessed major challenges to the NPP integrity and the threats that it brought in, and how Rosatom was involved in all that breaches of the nuclear safety. And final part of our review will be dedicated to the legal assessment of the arguments that we provided, and it shows how we assess the degree of IHL violation and how we plan to bring the Rosatom's staff to responsibility.
The key source was the evidence of the witnesses, and from the beginning of the 2023, we had 23 deep interviews. 20 of them were with different people working at the plant, and we got a wider picture, and we got different viewpoints of different employees of the plant on what was happening in Enerhodar and also in the plant. Also, the relatives who focused their attention on the behavior of people who are there, they shared with us additional 17 testimonies of the people who live in Enerhodar. And chronologically, we started our research in March 25 till now, and most of the information which is related to the tortures and the violation of human rights in Enerhodar and at the plant, it refers to 22-23, because it was easier to get access to information in 22-23 because the population was moving more actively. But there are also other reasons, because the occupational regime got institutionalized, those detention places that we are writing about, some of them which are mentioned in the report are not functional, but that does not mean that people from Enerhodar and those who work on the ZNPP, they are not in detention facilities. That's not so. We will tell about that a little later. And also part of the sources are publications and open sources, information from Telegram channels, local ones, information from official reports of Rosatom and information from mass media. But the basis of our study, well, it basically became possible thanks to our field reporters. And now let's move to looking at the occupation itself, and I will give the floor to Denise. Thank you. In general, as Roman mentioned, we started from examining the story, the history of occupation of Enerhodar, and our objective was to understand whether there are some features which differ Enerhodar from other occupied Ukrainian towns and cities. First thing we saw that Enerhodar, we could identify several stages of occupation, and each one of these stages has different behavior, is characterized by different behavior of occupational administration, and that's towards the population of the town and towards NPP. The first stage, it did not last long. You can see the quotation on one of the characteristics of this stage, and the main characteristic was that there was no definite differentiation between occupational forces. Well, basically, the military did not know what they had to do in the occupied town, and the local community, which was counteracting the occupation, and they were organizing the special events. The town was occupied on the 3rd of March, and the situation was in the situation of sort of dual management. The occupational forces were trying to establish their power, but the municipal authorities continued to operate in March. Most of the members of the town council retired. The local radio channel stopped broadcasting, and many people from the schools were sent to vacation. But in the end of March, both parties, the local communities and the occupational authorities, they started showing different activities, especially the Ukrainian community of the town. You can see the photograph that's next to the monument to Taras Shevchenko. There were up to 1,500 participants of the protests against occupation, and it was related to kidnapping of the deputy mayor of the town. Also, in March, the occupational administration appointed Andriy Shevchik, the leading engineer of the NPP. He was appointed the head of the occupational town administration, and also militia headed by Selivanov, who used to be the deputy minister of defense of Ukraine. He was appointed the head of the local militia, and they were responsible for occupational discipline. The stage that didn't last long, and in April 22, the systematization of occupational regime started and the systematization of terror. That was a certain switch from experimental management to creating the permanent institutions of occupational authorities. This covered three spheres: administrative, information, and repressive. The symbolic demonstration of the new order was this action, the Immortal Regiment, where about 1,000 participants with the Soviet and Russian flags participated, and the head of the occupational authorities said that the ice has been broken and the local community realized that Russia is for long here. When we are talking about this period, we can also mention that that was the regime of dual control. And in the first period, during April, this regime was appropriate to occupational administration. Then, during the second period, was basically existed mostly in Zaporizhzhia NPP, and that is what differs this from other occupied territories. That is because there is the Zaporizhzhia NPP, which is the object around which the town was created, and the administration has special challenges related to that. And that leads to the situation which complicates the work for military and civilian administration. NPP is under dual subordination. De jure, it's under Ukrainian administration, but in fact, it's managed by Russian troops. That is what creates challenges for managing a complicated nuclear infrastructure, which is technically integrated into Ukrainian grid. And electricity till August 22 was supplied to Ukrainian grid. The rotation of personnel was preserved, and Enerhodar has an impact on the personnel policy. For example, Enerhodar fired 3 representatives of employees because they participated in this event, Immortal Regiment. The presence of the plant creates the space for preserving certain legitimate Ukrainian power there. And the third stage is formalization of annexation. And what is specific for this period is that there is simultaneous integration of Enerhodar at 2 levels. There is a pseudo referendum on annexation of Enerhodar in September 22, but in parallel, in Enerhodar, Zaporizhzhia NPP is connected to a Russian nuclear system. People were forced to sign contracts with Rosatom, and those people who refused to cooperate were not allowed to enter the plant. Unlike the first quite reactive periods of Russian Federation, this period is characterized by a certain strategic complexity and certain legal formalization. The nuclear infrastructure is integrated and the occupied town itself. And now a few words about Rosatom, which manages occupied Enerhodar. The first and the most demonstrative moment was, well, these were administrative appointments of people from Rosatom Corporation to the senior positions in Enerhodar. No one was trying to hide that. We see the quotation of Mr. Tkabuchava. He's one of the deputies of Mr. Likhachov, the president of Rosatom, who says, yes, they tell us, but we put our people to manage the town. And in 2022, the head of the administration was appointed Eduard Senavoz, the former general director of service company Smolensk NPP, and later Maxim Pukhov replaced him, who used to be the mayor of Russian nuclear town Polarny Zori, and for 11 years he worked at different positions at Kolska NPP. The leadership of Energoatom say that their role is to be part of the strategy.
Енергодар є вкрай особливим випадком від інших окупованих міст, тому що він повністю фінансується, міський бюджет повністю фінансується коштами корпорації.
Municipal budget is fully funded from the Russian federal budget directly, and just as with the appointment with the mayor that was done very obviously to demonstrate that it was done. And here we see the statement by Eduard Senavoz, who clearly stated about the direct dependence of the Enerhodar as a city, as a municipality from the Rosatom Corporation. That is, last year, they contributed directly, I mean the corporation, 3 billion rubles into the development of the city. And the third very important aspect was the cultural policy and the very specific cultural policy, very demonstrative aspects of propaganda, which remain very aggressive in the public space. More specifically, I would like to point out to the educational policy. As of July 2024, more than 100 graduates of students of Enerhodar schools had signed contracts for further education in Sebastopol Technical University and other high educational institutions across Russia, with the view of future contract with Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. This shows how Rosatom is strategically planning training of future personnel for the nuclear power plant, and how they are interested in influx of young staff. Here you see this is called the Rosatom School, and here they act strategically. They clearly understand the lack of staff. For the NPP, they clearly see that many members of the personnel, they quit this area because of occupation and relocated to Ukrainian territory, and that's why they are interested in training new younger staff. This slide shows the investment projects which Rosatom has all around the world. They are to some extent a unique company in Russia. Their position in the world nuclear market is rather strong. They act as a specific organizational form, that is, they combine, they unite in one corporation, the corporate function and the function of local administration. Specificity of public companies in Russia is that they are subordinated in line with the Russian legislation directly to the top leadership of the country, which allows them to build up more flexible strategies, to remain more flexible in their informational policy. We have found that while some media were reluctant in demonstrating their connection with Russian media, some others, at least 6 big media companies, big media agencies, had shown their connection and dependence on financial support of Rosatom in many countries. And Rosatom thus has a huge experience both in nuclear management. They take dominant position. They control 44 facilities on uranium enrichment. They operate in 33 countries. They control 40% of conversion facilities, and they are rather attractive because of one huge prevalence. They are very highly centralized. This is a vertical corporation with a huge number of subcontractors which operate under central subordination, unlike many other Western companies. And actually, please do not perceive this as advertising, as an advertising of Rosatom, but this is to emphasize their advantages, because they use all those advantages of high centralization, high number of subcontractors, of vertical centralization to strengthen their occupational impact. Because technical dependence on Rosatom may limit negative response at the global level to the activities of Rosatom. And here we will have a sharp transition from what I've just mentioned to the problems of occupation. We should clearly understand that occupation is not limited with only administrative processes. That administrative processes are based on a dark background of suppression, intimidation, and violations of human rights. The occupational power, the occupational authorities had established a network of seven institutions, seven places of unlawful detention, and they use it both for a short time interrogation and up to the long-term detention, unlawful long-term detentions. From midsummer 2022, we clearly see that all those seven places of unlawful detention, they operated simultaneously. Thus, the police department in Enerhodar acted as the major center from which served like a headquarters that managed all the tortures and detentions of Ukrainian citizens everywhere in this territory. Here you see the documented methods of torture, physical, psychological, and detention conditions. And we clearly pointed out to the systemic and large-scale nature of these measures. First of all, those measures were applied to all the participants of resistance activities that were demonstrated at the early stage of occupation. Then it was applied to the former Ukrainian servicemen, to the families, and we had marked 1,500 cases of unlawful detentions. I also would like to point out to the logic of this violence. It was not of sporadic nature. It was not of occasional nature. It was not based on personal negative attitudes. On the contrary, it was of organized nature. It was of systemic nature. And moreover, the occupational power had established a system when cycle-like nature of violence was a specific feature of the regime. That is, some people first were detained, tortured, then released, and then detained once again. And thus, it was actually possible to predict a pattern in line with which the violence could be applied to either a victim or to a family. So the scheme was as follows. First, people were detained, then they were released, then were brought once again, interrogated, searched, and in attempts to convince, to cooperate with the occupational authorities were made at later stages. Then tortures were applied in case of negative results. So we we have found a specific pattern how people were detained. First of all, these were people with manifested pro-Ukrainian position. That pro-Ukrainian position could be reflected either in social networks of that people, or this were just testimonies of their neighbors, etc. The second category of detentions were applied to people, irrespective of their pro-Ukrainian position, but in line with their professional corporate belonging to Zaporizhzhia NPP. And actually here I would like to point out to two nuances. One specificity was that a pressure upon NPP corporate workers was made with a purpose to retain them at the NPP, and actually in many situations main objective of any intimidation was to intimidate people and to discipline them in advance. That is when they tried to convince people to sign up a contract with Rosatom, but these people remained reluctant to do this, even without having pro-Ukrainian position. They are trying to force them in many ways. So here you saw the illustration describing the cycle type way, that is the patterns which were applied by Rosatom in terms of torture. We had documented the systemic role of Rosatom in repressions, and actually corporation played an active role in identification and bringing of Ukrainian citizens to the places of illegal and unlawful detention. Quite often, Rosatom representatives directly cooperated with the special services which worked in the state.
In some cases, they participated in the sessions of interrogations. They were asking questions, and the Truth Hounds documented 13 events when Ukrainian employees were forced to sign the contract with Rosatom, and that was accompanied by tortures. Interests of Rosatom as to detaining Ukrainian employees of NPP were going beyond the limits of Enerhodar. We believe that at the federal level there was a policy not to allow certified personnel of NPP to go outside of Enerhodar. We documented that in a database of Russian border guards. There was probably information about licensed personnel of NPP with the indication to put obstacles to their crossing the border, and that demonstrates that there was a coordination at the highest level between Rosatom and other Russian Federation bodies, including Russian Special Services and Occupational Administration. Now I would like to give the floor to Volodymyr.
Дякую дуже, Денисе.
Thank you, Denise.
Власне, я говоритиму про
Yes, actually, I'll be talking about the legal assessment of the actions in Enerhodar and actions of the Russian army and Rosatom against civilians in the town and at Zaporizhzhia NPP. And I'll be talking about qualification of these actions, types of responsibility of different people, persons, but I would like to emphasize two things first. First, these actions were systemic and large scale. They were not sporadic. They persecuted and they followed the policy of different Russian institutions and Russian authorities. And second is the role of Rosatom in implementation of this policy, not as an observer, but as facilitator who actively was making possible the commitment of such crimes. Talking about identified international crimes, which we can describe in the context of occupation of Zaporizhzhia NPP. First of all, that was illegal deprivation of liberty and also torture and inhuman treatment that Denise mentioned. You saw the examples of that. And kidnapping. There are no questions as to tortures and inhuman treatment, but when it comes to illegal deprivation of liberty, it's more complicated. The word torture and inhuman treatment doesn't have the word illegal, but it just means that there's no justification of such actions when it comes to deprivation of liberty. The international humanitarian laws gives discretion to the state in some cases to deprive certain persons of liberty. And that is when the person could present the threat to the state. That's acceptable, that's used by different participants of the armed conflicts, and that's related to the spies and others. But in case with NPP, the ground for detaining these people wasn't some aggressive activity against Russian army or Rosatom. Very often these were their political views which were not materialized, or sometimes it was just the competences of a person and its and the fact that the person didn't want to cooperate with Russian special services or Rosatom. The person wouldn't commit any active actions, but if Russian military structure could see some obstacle to achieving its political objectives, they would detain such people. Talking about forceful kidnapping, that's when we don't know where the person is. There was a person who was kidnapped near Enerhodar. That's a tragical story about journalist Victoria Roshina. She was kidnapped, in fact, and it could be considered as the forceful kidnapping. For a long time, we didn't know where Victoria was. I will move on, and first of two aspects that I emphasized in my introduction, that is large-scale and systemic nature. That's not just in the context of understanding what was the scale of committing crimes against civilians, but it's important from the point of view of legal qualification. Usually, when we are talking about any violations of human rights within the armed conflict, we are talking about war crimes and the violation of humanitarian law. But when there is the element of system that it is systematic and large scale, this means that this is the policy of the state as to the crimes against humanity. That's the crime that requires more evidence, but in case with the Enerhodar, we can say that such crimes were committed. Where can we see that these were systematic and large scale? As Denis demonstrated, the system of detention was quite big, and the places where such civilians were tortured, and these are places in Enerhodar and close to Enerhodar, and it demonstrates quite a large-scale campaign of such crimes. And these centers, detention centers, they operated for quite a long time. The location wasn't changed every time. These were such permanent detention centers, and that means that these were systematic. Other factors proving that is who were the people. These were groups who were kidnapping or torturing people. These were same groups, so they were coordinating their actions between themselves. Often they would act in coordination with the senior leadership of Russian army. I will show that later. In general, it's more about the policy of the state bodies more than about some sporadic acts of some individual from Russian Federation. Talking about tortures, very often, and my colleagues mentioned that when torturing, they had a certain purpose, which would be in line with the purposes and objectives of the Russian Federation. We're talking about achieving a certain result. In some cases, it was either suppress any signs of anything Ukrainian, or very often it's to force people to sign contract or to cooperate with Rosatom. As to persons who were involved into committing of these crimes and their structure, the case with the Enerhodar is unique and interesting from the point of view that the senior level of political management is not involved into direct commitment of crimes. They act usually as coordinator or those who give orders. In case with the Enerhodar, these crimes were often committed by the representatives of FSB and the heads of the police. They were committing these crimes, and the middle rank of military or occupational police were involved into the system of committing the crimes, and the lowest rank, they didn't participate in tortures. It would happen in some cases, but usually this lowest level falls under the category of just assisting when they would bring the person into the cell to further give this person to Russian military or to Federal Security Service. And also another category is representatives of Enerhodar. Their role, Denise mentioned that we did not document the cases when the people, when the personnel of Rosatom were torturing the personnel of NPP. But from that, usually the kidnapping and tortures would start. Representatives of Rosatom were present at the interrogation. At interrogations, very often they would indicate the person who they need to cooperate with them. And that means that representatives of Rosatom knew what would be happening with those people. They were together with the representatives of Federal Security Service. And such actions indicate a certain role of Rosatom. They indicate such type of cooperation as the crime when people were just helping others in committing the crime. And in the end, I would make such basically a statement. This is the first historic example when the acting NPP is under occupation within the armed conflict, and the presence of the enemy's army on such a special facility creates this balance in how the strong infrastructure could operate. But it's not just occupation that makes pressure, but it's also the corporation which is also pressing those people who are responsible for operation and for safety of this facility. And that creates risks for NPP. Thank you. And I give the floor to Roman.
Let us start with the next element of our report. This is about the nuclear safety and the violation of human rights related to the nuclear safety and nuclear protection. Why I would like to emphasize on this interrelated things, nuclear safety and nuclear security. In response to the incidents that kept happening in the vicinity, in close vicinity to the station, the EAI had presented seven pillars of nuclear safety. And recently, Rafael Grossi, the president of EAA, had mentioned that 6 pillars out of the 7 safety pillars have been breached in the Zaporizhzhia NPP. Actually, there's a prevents from establishing, from creating a safe this is a conclusion that could be easily drawn from the facts that previous my colleagues mentioned. Actually, this is a serious connection between that atmosphere of violence and violations of safety, nuclear safety and security. From the testimonies of the witnesses, which the plant employees and after the full signatures motivation to sign up the contract with Rosatom. And here one would recollect the issue and features of this very specific occupational regime that my colleague Denise described, and one may guess that the plant staff, they had family, they had children, and one of the witnesses shared his instructions to his kid. He instructed his kid to remain almost unnoticeable when leaving home. And he instructed the kid, we live in two environments. One is the home environment, and here you can freely express yourself, while when you go out from home, you should stay pretend that you are noticeable, not go into contact with the surrounding people, and this clearly demonstrates the overall atmosphere of intimidation and suppression that imposed additional restraints on the safety and security of nuclear power plant. And here I would like to give the floor to Darina Rogachuk. Thank you, Roman. I'm representing Greenpeace Ukraine today. For Greenpeace, it was a big honor to work with Truth Hounds on this report. We are very proud to provide our expertise and to assist in dissemination of this report. We believe this report is very important because it allows us to raise our voice for those people who suffer because of Russian actions, because of the actions of Rosatom. We would like to raise our voice for those victims. Actually, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant had become a permanent threat. Many people know that it is occupied. Many people assume that it may create dangerous situations, and unlike Kyiv and Kharkiv, which continue to respond to challenges, but still they live under Ukrainian domination, under Ukrainian authorities. Unlike those cities, Enerhodar and Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant, they exist in very different situation. Actually, the plant had turned into a bomb with a delayed action, and the actions taken by Russian military forces and Rosatom has been being followed by us from the first days of occupation. Our first report as to the situation in NPP was produced on March 2022. That was done by our foreign colleagues who had been observing the occupation of the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe under a huge shock. I'm happy to present Sean Burney and Jan van der Put, experts from Greenpeace Ukraine and from Greenpeace Global. These are legendary people who took a mission to secure the world from new nuclear disaster and to present and publish information about Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant due to satellite images, due to satellite investigation, due to our very close work on Zaporizhzhia NPP. We found ourselves capable to inform the world what's going on, because on the one hand, what's going on in Zaporizhzhia has a huge humanitarian aspect, but it has a huge nuclear safety aspect, and we assume that we from Russian sources we won't be able to understand what's going on the plant, and we continue our reports. Our first report was published in summer 2022, where we informed how many military equipment and how many Russian military personnel remained in the NPP. We also informed about military shellings of Nikopol. Actually, militarization is a big threat for the nuclear power plant. We know that the Russians systemically provide reports to EIA about Ukrainian attacks on the nuclear power plant, and the fact that a huge number of military equipment was deployed in the territory of this a nuclear power plant showed that it was a threat, and in fact.
Після знищення Каховської ГЕС 6 червня 2023
Also, on the 6th of June 2023, the Zaporizhzhia NPP lost access to water. 6 reactors were stopped from 2022. Yesterday, there was the 10th, so to say, Jubilee blackout at the plant. And in such conditions, we saw, thanks to satellite images, that Russians very actively are getting ready to recommissioning of Zaporizhzhia NPP. This way, they want to legalize NPP as their own property. And actually, this is a huge crime against nuclear safety, with such a number of personnel, with the fact that we don't know what the quality of this personnel is. This equipment is we don't know in which condition. Every NPP is like a piece of jewelry. It's unique mechanism. The colleagues were saying that when a person moves from one department of the plant to another one, it's not 100% sure that can manage it?
Особливо, якщо
Will
це
Russian
дуже
specialists
Путіна,
be
це
able
дуже велике
to
питання, тому що
manage
може бути
NPP
дуже непередбачувані
when it
наслідки
is
з усім
relaunched?
вище перерахованим.
Well, it's difficult to say.
Ми
The
побачили,
consequences
і
could
першому
be
триместрі
really grave.
цього року
In May this year, we
росіяни
made public the
по-перше,
fact that
підготують
Russians,
підстанцію
first of all,
для подачі
they are
газу до
constructing a new
Нагадаю,
pump
що Каховська ГЕС
house
у нас
to supply water and
знищена, підірвана
reactor.
росіянами. Відповідно,
Kakhovska
забезпечення води для охолодження.
hydropower plant is destroyed by Russians, and there's not enough water for the plant. The Russians started constructing the pump house, and they also are building electrical poles to disconnect Zaporizhzhia NPP from Ukrainian grid and to get it synchronized with the Russian energy system. Rafael Grossi, the head of IAEA, came to Kiev, and he disagreed with the conclusions of Greenpeace that these electrical poles are connected with the fact that they are planning to relaunch the plant. And then we published another report showing how this network of poles is getting larger. Mr. Grossi was saying, yes, they're constructing something, but that's not for a launch. But we are sure that's the active preparation to a crime of relaunch. The relaunch of NPP is impossible under the control of the occupiers because Zaporizhzhia NPP is the property of Ukraine. It's violation of all international norms. Only Ukrainian specialists who know it very well can do anything at the plant. Only they can manage it. And I will enumerate some main things why it is impossible to launch it from the technical point of view, because the equipment is in the state of emergency. It's depleted. The personnel is not there. We used to have 11,000, now there are only 3,000 people there. The loss of electricity will lead to the problems in the system of cooling. And also the consequences could be very grave, including radioactive contamination. We can add only that when preparing this restarting or relaunch, no one thinks about what consequences it could have to people who live in Enerhodar. We do not say anything about nature. We, as people who survived Chernobyl disaster, our parents, our generation, we understand that the nuclear disaster is real disaster. And as Greenpeace, in cooperation with the international partners, in partnership with friends from other NGOs, we have one big objective. That is, we want Rosatom to fall under the sanctions of European Union. Rosatom, which is responsible for occupation and crimes at Zaporizhzhia NPP. We want Rosatom to become such a business partner with whom no one would like to
досі,
work.
як колеги показували,
Rosatom, as colleagues
бере участь
showed,
в бізнес-проектах
Rosatom
світові.
participates in business projects all over the world,
Нас, очевидно,
even
підтримують дуже сильно, так, на європейському рівні.
in projects
Отже,
in the
я
countries
ще раз
that support
дякую Truth Hounds
us
за цей репорт.
in
Я ще раз
Europe.
хочу
I
наголосити,
thank
що
Truth Hounds for this
ми будемо
report.
підтримувати
I want to emphasize that
дії,
supporting
які будуть
any actions
допомагати зробити
which will help
Rosatom міжнародно
make
визнаним
Rosatom
кримінальним злочинцем. І я сподіваюся, що цей звіт
recognized
стане
as
однією з
criminal,
великих
international
доказових
criminal.
баз
And I
досягнення
hope that this
цієї
report will become an evidence in achieving such an
Дякую дуже.
objective.
Я думаю, що я якраз
Thank
підкріплю
you.
тут коротко,
And
що
I would
відповідальність
add briefly as to
Так, і
responsibility of
якраз
Rosatom.
саме продовжити цю дискусію про фінансові санкції
And
і їхньої
to
важливості. тому що
continue
справді
discussion
Денис
about
дуже
financial
багато
sanctions
цю
and how
мережу
important they are.
присутності
Denise
Росатома у всьому
demonstrated
світі і на різних континентах.
that
Тому
Rosatom
справді,
is
як
present
санкції
over the
проти
world,
Росатома
and
як
the
юридичної особи, такі
sanctions
персональні санкції мають
against
вплив на
Rosatom as
розширення діяльності або навіть
physical
припинення
person,
діяльності, яку
and
наразі
some
має Росатом
personal
за кордоном.
sanctions
Також йдеться і про аспект
would
бізнесу,
help a
людини,
lot.
взагалі
And
історично
also we're
права
talking
людини
about
сприймалися
business aspect
як
and human rights.
співвідношення
Historically,
людини до
human
держави,
rights
але
were
з
perceived as interrelation between the state and the people.
розпочалася дискусія про те,
But
що
now the discussion
правами людини повинні
started
слідкувати не лише держави,
that
а й
not just
міжнародні
states, but
корпорації чи організації.
international
І в цьому
corporations have
аспекті
to follow human rights. And Rosatom, as the representative of international corporation, should be responsible for violation of human rights, crimes against human rights. Also talking about criminal proceedings against legal entity and individuals. Quite recently in 2018 in Argentina, the leader of the head of security service for Argentina was got sentence because they were like Rosatom facilitators when they were giving the persons to the representatives of the Argentine dictatorship regime, and these persons were detained. And that wasn't the corporation that was directly involved into tortures, but their role was in helping committing international crimes. And such cases are mentioned when the representatives of corporations were made responsible and persecuted for committing or participating in such crimes. And also a few words about corporate mechanisms. Cooperation with Rosatom is a red flag because that's the reputational risk for states who cooperate. It's not just from the point of view of human rights that from that point of view you shouldn't cooperate with them, but from the point of view that within Rosatom very often the officials who are managers very often they have ties with the Federal Security Service and with Russian investigation service. And for the security of those states where Rosatom is present, this is another red flag. They need to think hard when they agree to cooperate with Rosatom. They need to think about the safety of their people, about violation of human rights, and about the supporting of some intelligence activities of Rosatom. Thank you. What could be done with Rosatom and continuing the appeals to reputational risks that may materialize, but there is such a situation when Rosatom is still the member of UN Global Compact. That's an agreement that unites different businesses, global businesses.
Так, друзі, щодо
Yes.
тривоги, хто
There's an alarm now. There is a shelter at the underground level. We will be finishing our event if you want to go to shelter, so you're welcome. And few final things. We need to exclude Rosatom from UN Global Compact. It's based on 10 principles, and these are, among them, there's respect of human rights. And the corporations have to protect human rights and not allow their violation. And the situation that I mentioned in the beginning is clear. We need to look for alternatives to Rosatom at the market of nuclear energy.
Про це ще ми трошечки поговоримо сьогодні. І також, звісно, ми закликаємо представників міжнародних організацій.
And of course, we encourage representatives of the international corporations to include the main conclusions from our report into the reports on the safety and security situation in the Zaporizhzhia NPP. And of course, all the calls to action that are written in our report will forward to many governments and will encourage them to suspend the cooperation with Rosatom and at least to minimize the cooperation with Rosatom or at least not to initiate new corporate relations and cooperation with Rosatom in new contracts. Thus, you may refer to our online report, which was published. And now I would like to finalize the presentation of our report, and then we will first we will give the floor to our two guests, and then I will give you an opportunity to ask questions. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Igor Katalanets, Executive Director from the Association of Relatives of Political Prisoners of the Kremlin. This organization has shared with us 17 testimonies of the witnesses who stay in Enerhodar. Thank you, Dmitry. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for that huge work that you had carried out. I haven't read the final version of the report, but I recollect your previous preliminary report, and keeping in mind all our discussions at the preparatory stages, I have an idea about this new report, and I'm very grateful for using our documented evidence, our documented testimonies from the Zaporizhzhia NPP employees in your report. Actually, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and Enerhodar city had turned into prison for those who have chosen to stay there. We have more than 20 documented stories and verified stories of people who were detained, who were tortured, and I may refer to the former Ukrainian administration of Enerhodar, who once stated that there might be up to 1,500 of such victims who left Enerhodar at different stages of occupation, but they never voiced out about their torture, about their suffering, and they are more focused on their rehabilitation, on revival from their terrible experiences. Some of them still remain beyond the borders of Ukraine. They remain abroad. Some of them eventually come to Ukraine. As of now, all the former Ukrainian staff of this nuclear power plant, they who still remain, they had become hostages, partially of their occupation and partially of because of different life circumstances. Nuclear power plant is very specific, very specific enterprise, and it requires highly qualified experts. And in line with the information that I have, and based on my communication with the Zaporizhzhia NPP staff now, I know that for them now it's impossible to relocate on the one hand. On the other hand, they still have hopes that the territory will be regained by Ukraine, and that Zaporizhzhia NPP will become Ukraine, will go to Ukrainian control once again. I do not wish to repeat what my previous colleagues had mentioned. I would like to add something new. As for those people who remain in detention as of today, we know about 30 cases. These are people who have been persecuted officially. That is, they who either are sentenced to besides that, many people are being detained silently, that is unofficially, and the fact of that detention actually is a proof of the Russian authorities' crimes, because we definitely know that there is much more people who who remain either in detention or under arrest, but who was not officially condemned. That is, we have Selesny, head of the shift in Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant. He allegedly was planning to commit a terrorist act, but actually there were no grounds for such a case. The case is based on assumptions and assumptions about the intent, about criminal intent of the detained. Also, we have Alexander Matyuhin, who was kidnapped actually in 2023 and sentenced to 13 years of deprivation of liberty. And he has lost 20 kilograms of his weight in detention. Ruslan Geraslamov, who suffers from regular torture, and now he has huge problems with health condition, and he applied many times requesting for help. Sergei Putin, who actually was again detained and kept in detention incommunicado, and he is blamed in attempted terrorist act. And once again, he is sentenced to 18 years of imprisonment, and no proofs were given in this case about his alleged intent. Then we know about people who died in detention. For example, Alexander Markov, who was a father of the NPP employee. He was 71 years of age, and last year he was detained, and actually he was detained for the transfer of money from his Ukrainian bank account to another bank account, and he was blamed in state treason and sentenced to 13 years of deprivation of liberty, and then when at the stage of being transported from one penitentiary institution to the other, he had died, and he has died, and the family even was unable to bury his body properly because the body was not given to the family. I, of course, won't mention everybody, but I would like to mention several people. I would like to mention two women, Tatiana Shulga and Natalia Shulga and Tatiana Kluchko. Tatiana was kidnapped from her own home, and allegedly he planned to commit a subversive act and then Natalia worked in a social assistance department. She worked with pensioners and she continued to support and provide help to pensioners even in occupation. But those women were detained because of the acts of loyalty. That is, when they when they have not received either Russian passports or continued to maintain communication with their Ukrainian relatives. Actually, this demonstrates a systemic persecution of Ukrainian people. We should continue with our attempts to liberate these people. And we should always raise the problem of Enerhodar Nuclear Power Plant employees as a special group of prisoners. As I mentioned, some 1,500 of employees have left because of occupation, but there are many people who were unable to leave because of different family circumstances, and now they are in terrible situation. I'm very grateful for this presentation in Kiev. I am happy about the simultaneous presentation in EAA agency today, because this will allow to raise the problem about liberation of Zaporizhzhia NPP employees from the station, and this will allow to advocate this issue via EAIA. Thank you for this intervention, and before wrapping up, I'm happy to give the floor even before we will have our Q&A session. I am now pleased to give the floor to Roman Netsovich from Dixie Group. Dixie Group is an organization which follows the Rosatom activities very closely. Thank you for this opportunity. Together, we now try to find arguments and convince the global community to limit the cooperation with Rosatom. Rosatom comprises 550 different enterprises and organizations which are involved into the nuclear fuel cycle production and other nuclear operations. And when we hear nuclear threats from Kremlin, and when we hear about the possibility to use nuke to intimidate the world, we should immediately recollect that Rosatom is part of this industry of the Russian Federation, and this raises the question why our Western allies do not pay attention to this part of Rosatom Corporation, which is involved into nuclear weaponry production. And For example, last year, the EU had bought nuclear materials for 700 million euros. It looks not much, but still this demonstrates the dependence.
That is dependence on 30% on enriched uranium and almost all fuel for VVR-type reactors. These are of Russian Soviet design, and they operate in the countries of the Western Europe. If just Rosatom would operate only in this sphere, we would be able to demand the speed up, the diversification, and we would demand building up the capacities in producing enriched uranium, and maybe in 3-4 years we could see gradual finishing of this cooperation. But Rosatom by 2030 plans to receive from non-main types of activities, and they use their status, their immunity as certain channel for getting different components, electronic, laser, optical systems of dual purpose. And that is for nuclear sector and also to help Russian industrial military complex. And they have such types of activities as composite materials, digital solutions, the accumulators, the 3D printing, and these all things are used in defense industry as well, in the industry of war. All these things are used in drones, and the Russians scale up the manufacturing of drones. And this status allows them to continue to participate in different scientific research projects. They say, we are scientists and science is outside politics. Talking about other aspect of military participation of Rosatom, we need to mention that on the territory of Zaporizhzhia NPP, the training of Archangel School goes on. They make UVOs. They know that Ukrainian forces cannot strike any equipment which is located on the territory of the MPP. And we also looked at the participation of Rosatom in many things. And we mean not just nuclear weapons, but different components for different types of weapons, Armata platform, the systems for identifying, for detecting the UVOs, the system of fighting UVOs, and the accumulators. They want to start making lithium accumulators sort of for the needs of Russian automobile industry. I have doubts, though, that Russians will start driving electromobiles. I believe that such things will be used for military. I would like to thank you for invitation. Thank you for your study, and I believe that together we can create the evidence database, and this way not just top management of Rosatom will be included into the sanctioned lists. We would like these sanctions to be more serious, and we can also make such microsurgical strikes, so to say, to show that Rosatom is not a sacred cow, and this way to recognize their contribution into the machinery of war and crimes. Thank you, Roman. Now Q&A session. Do you have any questions, any comments? Please raise your hands and you'll receive the microphone. I am Olga Kasharina. I am co-founder of the NGO Anti-Crisis Expert Center. I would like to add to what Roman said. In 2023, in February, Likhachov spoke at the session of the Russian Duma of Russia, and he said that they are making and they are supplying conventional weapons, and it is in the Ukrainian front already. And secondly, I would like to mention that now Zaporizhzhia NPP is used as the instrument of war. The explosion of Kakhovka hydro power plant was made without approval of Rosatom, because Rosatom was planning to reconnect Zaporizhzhia NPP in August of 23, and they wanted, their plan was, I had some inside information, there was a plan to reconnect the scheme, they had the scheme for that, and they started shellings. Now, when they have the 10th blackout and the plant is operating on reserve diesel operators, why they're doing it and why IAEA helping in that. IAEA, in the beginning of 2025, they make rotation via the temporary occupied territory. They were saying, and that is the violation of international law. IAEA, it's a complicated issue because the mission, they are also hostages of occupational authorities. They have no impact on technical solution of occupational authority. They don't have any access to all premises. They cannot freely communicate with the personnel. For that, there should be the political decision of the leadership of Ukraine. They say, okay, let something be violated, but let the mission be there, because they can trust only the mission. The experts of mission, these are not those who had the experience of work on these types of reactors. There is the inspector on the accounting for nuclear materials, but others, there were about 200 plus missions. It's very difficult to find professionals for the missions. And these are just some people, like radiation physicists. They work there. They work usually with some medical equipment. They register. They say that what they register what they see, what they write in the weekly reports. There is some progress. They write that we heard that some artillery weapons were moving out of the NPP site. Again, when they are saying that Ukrainian drone hit some training center there, these are provocations, like it happened in December 2024. Besides, I would like to add, MAGATE has IAEA has a strange position. The General Conference finished. Russia is a member of the managers. Ukrainian diplomats were trying via this, because of this situation with the occupation for the first time in history of Zaporizhzhia NPP, to suspend the membership in the Council of Managers, to suspend the membership of Russia in this council. Southern Africa was the member of this council because they are this is the only country which has a nuclear power plant. So basically, Ukraine did not find support within Western partners. That's first. Second, if we look at the schedule of events under the auspices of IAEA in Russia in autumn, there will be several webinars organized by IAEA in Obninsk. And that's on the physical protection at nuclear facilities. What can we do with IAEA? And the contribution of Russia into IAEA compared to the US is not so big when it comes to financing. We need to make some pressure on that via mass media so that the society in the West understands the degree of the danger of the situation.
Друзі, у кого ще можливо є
Dear
запитання?
friends, any further questions?
У Миколи там на останньому ряду.
Mykola, I can see Mykola has a question. Good afternoon. Mykola Yurlov from the Ministry of Internal Affairs. First of all, I would like to thank you for the report. I believe it will be very useful to us in our everyday work. So my question is as follows. What is the most important message which we can right now communicate to our partners who continue to use the services of Rosatom? Would you please mention three, four major messages? Thank you for this opportunity to sum up and to wrap up this presentation. So the major findings of our report are as follows. Rosatom is complicit in establishing the occupational regime in Enerhodar, in particular the existence of a huge suppressive power then they contributed to illegal repressions and unlawful detentions in Enerhodar. The next is that Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant remains not only under occupation, it remains very close to the contact line, and moreover, Rosatom management intentionally creates additional threats. So these three major arguments why Rosatom should be excluded from the nuclear global compact, and this will entail huge consequences for Rosatom, and the same arguments could be used to convince businesses that working with Energoatom, they create huge reputational risks because Rosatom violates nuclear security and safety on the one hand, and international humanitarian law on the other hand. And then Rosatom management and leadership should be subject to international criminal persecution, and we encourage the countries to apply their right to universal jurisdiction and to bring these people to responsibility. In case of the absence of the questions, I would like to thank you to all those who dedicated 2 hours of their life to this discussion. I would like to thank you to that 39 witnesses who agreed to communicate with us, and to the interviewers who dealt with that testimonies. I also would like to thank you to the whole team who was involved, to Denis Sultangaliyev, to Alice, and to Yuri.
Хочу подякувати Володимиру Гришку, який сьогодні
Presentation in Vienna, and I would like to thank you to Grishko, to Victoria Mamolova, to Sharon Burnett, to Vitaly Poberezhny, and all those from Truth Hounds team who contributed to public